today's podcast, we're going to explore the psychology of avoidance. We're going to talk about what makes delivering bad news feel so awkward, scary, or guilt-inducing. We're going to share with you some real-life examples. So you're joining us today. It's me, Barbara, and Cecilia, and we're
Hello?
going, hello, Cecilia. We're going to talk about why it's so hard to say the hard stuff. Cecilia, I'm going to kick off our conversation. Can you share with us a time you had to deliver bad news or a scenario where you coach someone through this? And why does it feel so difficult?
Yes, it's a good question, Barb. It's something that nobody enjoys doing. And I have an example actually of a time when it was done poorly. And this was an example given to me by a friend whose company was giving the announcement that everyone had to return to the office 5 days a week. Now, I know a lot of companies had gone through this and are still going through it. And a lot of them struggled with how to actually deliver this piece of news. And I would admit that some companies did it well, while a majority of them did not. And this is from what I've read and seen in the news and on the internet. So in this particular real life case, she said that it was delivered in poor form, without empathy, and without thinking of the actual receiver's experience. So it went like this. The CEO shared a story, a human story. And I know that we use storytelling as a way of building connection and a way of showing our authenticity and vulnerability. And I think he was on the right track, but it was done poorly. He shared a story about how his daughter, an adult, who was feeling depressed because she had to work from home. So he shared a story in this in a as an example of his daughter was complaining about how she was depressed because she wasn't able to socialize with her coworkers and she had to work from home. So he had this epiphany and said, I have to do something about it. And that was the story he shared when when preparing his audience for the bad news he was about to deliver. So, as you can imagine, it did not land well. And afterwards, there was a lot of buzz about how that was done poorly and it was a little tone deaf. So, that's an example of where some coaching and some preparation would have been very helpful.
So,
Additionally,
sorry, keep going,
addition
Cecilia. Yeah.
that's okay. Additionally, could have just run it by a few people. It seems that it's obvious if a couple of people just heard his story would have said, "No, I don't think your audience would be able to relate."
So him telling the story about his daughter, about, oh, my daughter's really suffering, and I really wanted to make an impact in her life because she's suffering. So that's why I've come to work, and I'm going to say you all need to come back to work. There was something really similar here in Australian politics, previous Prime Minister, where he said, I didn't know what to do about women's issues. And so I asked my wife, and this is what my wife said. And we're like, how out of touch are you if you have to
Yes.
reference those kind of experiences? So I've got two questions for you, Cecilia. You really piqued my interest around this. Like, why didn't it land? What was it about it that was so wrong? What could he have done differently in that situation?
Well, first off, not everyone who was receiving this message would be a young Gen Z in her 20s or 30s on her own. You really want to address the people who are receiving the news. And it's not that you have to address everyone specifically, but really know your audience, know who you're speaking to, know how it's going to land. There was another example that I came across, and it was for a hurricane situation. Now, natural disasters are never easy, and leaders are always tasked with how to deliver the news. And in this situation, it was a VP of operations who was calling out to the staff after a hurricane to help with the cleanup efforts so that they can be back in operation as quickly as possible. Now, from an operational standpoint, that is not a huge ask. Like, let's rally the team together, let's get our operation up so that we can start receiving guests and resume operations. But how that fell flat was there was absolutely no consideration that all the staff members were reeling from the effects of the hurricane. And it ranged. Some were seriously affected to those who were not affected at all. But how would he have known that unless he did some homework and checked and try to understand and explore, prepare for what the audience is going through right now. So, in the absence of that, the operation actually received huge backlash, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of social media pointing fingers at how that was poorly handled. And of course, there was another statement made in the press after that, but the damage was already done. So empathy is so important. Empathy is always first. Who is your audience? What positions are they in? How would they receive the news? How do I anticipate that? How do I add that before I go into
Mm.
what the solution is going to be?
I used to work with a coach who said, um, see the shit down the river before you paddle down. Sorry for my spicy language. See the muck. See the muck further down the river before you paddle down. Preempt that it's coming so that you can address it before you hit it. So it's kind of like know what you're in for, like you're saying, know your audience. And it also reaffirms some of the stuff that you and I talk about, Cecilia, too, in terms of when we're talking about empathy, part of that is understanding that people experience stress in different ways. So if we go back to that CEO, he said, "Oh, my daughter's suffering, so therefore I'm going to respond in
I'm going
that."
to do something about it.
Yeah. And it's like if I was in that, if I was his 50 something employee, I'd go, I'm not your teenage daughter. Why? That's really patronizing to even think that my stress is the same as hers. What
Yes.
stresses her doesn't stress me. And we experience stress in different ways, and different things will stress us. So it's that one size fits all kind of approach to people's stress. I want to ask you too, because you've said it a few times. I'm curious to see what you think. I know I've got my opinions, but what do you think empathy is, and why is that empathy important in those difficult conversations?
So, empathy is an interesting topic, and I know that we're going to have future conversations about this. It's not something that can be fabricated. It really does not come across well if it's forced. So, it does require one to stop, to really be present and use skills that are not often taught as we were growing up. It's just not emotional intelligence is not highly rated as a leadership skill, but it is. You will ask any leader and they will say emotional intelligence, empathy, especially in challenging times, is paramount in understanding how to interact with others. So, in a nutshell, I would say empathy is really being able to see or try to imagine what the other person would be going through. You
It's
will
the
never ever know. You will never ever truly know what it is like to be on the other side. So when you say I know what it's like, that is not true. That is a false statement and that could really anger and upset people. I can only imagine what it's like. I imagine it must be difficult. I am sorry that it is frustrating. That is a form of empathy, but you will never ever truly know. It's the effort in trying to see from the other person's perspective. And that gives as someone a sense of I've been heard, I've been seen, I matter here.
Yes, and I guess the best analogy I've seen around the difference between sympathy and empathy is like sympathy is where, oh gee, that really sucks to be down in that hole, whereas empathy is I want to know what it feels like and I imagine that it feels like this and I imagine this is what you're seeing from that perspective, even though I'm not down there with you. I'm
You're talking
curious,
about the Brene Brown video
is
that
that a Renee Brown
that
one? Is that?
Brene Brown animation, beautifully done. So I think we can add it in the notes as a great example of difference between sympathy and empathy.
Yeah,
Sympathy is, oh, I feel so sorry for you.
yeah.
Empathy is, I'm sorry that it's so hard. I'll never know what it's like, but I am right here with you.
Mm.
That's empathy.
Mm, yeah. And understanding the difference between those two in terms of your language delivery. And what I find really interesting too, if I can, I'll see if I can find the research around this, is that what I've learned from leadership experts is that if you've got a fractured relationship or a damaged relationship, the quickest way to build rapport and trust with the people that you're leading is practicing empathy. It's one of those emotional intelligence tools that helps you establish relationships, leadership relationships with people by practicing empathy. Well, we get off
Yeah.
topic a bit though, Cecilia. I want to ask, going back to these difficult conversations, I know for myself, sometimes and I think a lot of people that I work with and a lot of people I coach, it is the fear of how people are going to react when
Mm,
when I share this news or I have to ask them something or tell them something, I'm really worried. And that's, I guess, where the empathy is a really powerful tool, isn't it? If I'm really worried about what somebody's going to think or feel or say, or if I'm going to be responsible for them.
yes, yes. So it really depends on the news, isn't it?
Yeah, you're losing your job today. That I reckon would be the hardest one, or
Yes,
especially with that unconscious, they're unaware, unconscious incompetence. I thought I was doing a
mm,
great job.
right, right. And what about service staff, frontline staff who are tasked with delivering bad news? They have
Yeah.
such tough jobs. And, I have a story, and this was when I was doing quite a bit of research on how to deliver bad news because a client wanted me to design a training for her company. So I feel that airline staff have some of the toughest jobs. Think about delayed flights. Think about all the people lining up at their counters with tired body language, and it's so obvious they're irate. And how much support do they receive, and how much training do they really get on how to manage angry, difficult, irate customers? So I experienced it firsthand, and the tables were turned because I was the one who was actually in the position to complain. So flight delays, we're travelers, we're experienced with flight delays. But this one was an exceptional flight delay. This was in total a 26-hour flight delay. So I don't know how you would handle it, Barb, in that situation. But believe me, I was not a happy customer. And she had to deliver some bad news to me. So the bad news was I got downgraded on my flight. On the flight that I was finally about to get on. But let me tell you, this person, I still think about her and I will give her a lot of credit. And the airline Cathay Pacific, I believe they had just delivered this new training and she just took it all on board because I saw every single step, how she used the techniques. But, without going into all the details, the flight was delayed and it was due to bad weather. So it's not the airline's fault. It was bad weather. But all the flights were pushed back. So at one point, we had to be sent to a hotel. So because the flights just could not take off, it was after 11 p.m. So imagine they put us onto a bus, they ship us to a hotel, And then they say, you have to be up at 5 a.m. because we're going to ship you back. We're going to transport you back to the
Ugh.
airport so that we can get you on an early flight. So just imagine this. I've
Yep,
been
I'm
at the airport.
cranky. I'm
Yeah, I'm
cranky.
at the airport. I was at the airport from 4 p.m. till midnight, and then awoken by the hotel to wake up at 5 a.m. So we're on the bus. Now, there were some winners, like, watching the sunrise. Wow, that was beautiful. Get to the airport. I am exhausted. I get to the counter. So this is how delivering bad news works. So first, they sent me a text where we apologize to inform you that due to the aircraft change, we've had to downgrade you. Wasn't serious. I was in premium economy. They had to put me in economy. It's not the end of the world, but I was not happy with that. I go up to the counter, and this poor woman had to give me the bad news. Now, she did it in such a masterful way. You know what she did? She looked at me in the eye. That is the key, the empathy part. Looking at the person, really giving them your full attention. She said, Miss Young, I know you must be frustrated, and I know that you are tired. I apologize. There's nothing I can do because of the change of the aircraft. And she said it in a very sharp tone, which meant like there was energy behind it. She wasn't going, oh, I'm so sorry, and, being passive. It was assertive, and yet it was full of energy. And then this is the next thing she did. And I can tell you, Bar, I'll be honest. At this point, I was shaking my head and I had an adult tantrum, meaning I just wanted to cry. Like I didn't know how else to react because I was just so tired. And this is the thing she did that really stood out. She got out from behind her terminal. You know how at airlines they have these big
Mm,
counters and
yeah,
they're behind this desk and they're tapping away. She pulled up this heavy lift, the
yeah.
divider. She lifted it up. She walked out and she stood next to me. Now that was something I had never seen before, and I thought, now that was quite clever. So like while I'm frustrated and tired and cranky, I'm still noticing all this because I thought this would be useful in training. She stands right next to me. She said, now, Miss Young, I cannot do anything about your seat. I will do my best to give you an upgrade, but for now, I am going to personally tag your bag and walk you to your gate. And that's what she did.
Wow.
I had
Wow.
nothing else. I had nothing else to say.
Wow. That's what you and I talk about, the difference between it's the human side of work, the
Yes,
humanness of that, right? So it
yes,
makes in my head, I'm visualizing, that skit in Little Britain where she goes, computer says no. No, sorry. No, the computer
yes,
says no. Sorry, Miss Young, your seat's been downgraded. Computer says no. But the difference is, like you said, is she lifts up this ginormous arm, crosses this huge boundary to connect with you on a human
yes,
level. And just
yes.
that human connection is enough for you that it's imprinted, I guess, the trauma of what you're experiencing, the discomfort, the distress that in that moment that someone deeply, deeply empathized with your experience in an assertive but not aggressive way. That's what I really love about what you're communicating.
Assertive. She
Mm,
maintained her assertiveness throughout. And she showed empathy. She offered assistance. And she said, I will make sure that your requests for an upgrade, because my obvious answer to a downgrade was, well, upgrade me to business class. Business class was full. She said, I have put you on the top of the list. No guarantees, but we will do our best. And then she walked me to the customs entrance. So I will always remember that because after I got through, this is 6 a.m., my flight didn't take off until 6 p.m. So I still had to sit there for 12 hours.
oh my
Thus,
goodness.
thus the 26-hour delay, total delay. But I have to say, it ends well, has a happy ending. I got upgraded to business class. It was a middle seat, but no complaints. I finally arrived at my destination at like 11 p.m., a day and a half later. But that was just such an amazing example that I had never seen before. And I thought, they just gave them some new training on what we call service recovery, or in this case, delivering bad news, whatever it may be. It was unique. I had never seen that, and I had not seen it since. This
Mm.
style.
And I think too, in those situations, it's like when people get knocked back for a loan, or you're being told that something due to your own human error, perhaps, has caused
Yes.
something to not happen, or you've paid something too late, so you've got an extra fine, or whatever those things are, and somebody's sharing that news. I know what I really love about that story is that there's this big Cathay Pacific is a massive company. It's a huge machine, and you could feel like you're invisible to people. You're just another number. You're just another seat on a plane, but you feel very human. And
Mm,
in those situations, it's a bit like the Little Britain, the computer says no scenario, is that your experience is unique to you, and she's acknowledging that. And I
yes.
like too what she did in that situation was give you, they were limited, but there's some options. And I
Yes.
don't know if that was something you were going to talk about in terms of the process of delivering bad news, in terms of, well, this is what we can't do this, but we can do this. These are the
Yes.
options that are still available to you, or these are the things we can do in this situation.
Yes. And that's where, going back to that first story about the return to office, what are the options available? What are the accessibility challenges that people are going through? What what resources are available? This is all a part of the communication piece, and that requires a lot of preparation. And what I find particularly surprising and astounding about this woman is she didn't have a lot of options. There were not a lot offered. And she decided that the option would be she would walk me to the gate.
Yeah.
So, the human side, as you said, that human touch, it makes a massive difference.
And it's
So
so
important.
it's still, yes, we have all of the digital tools that help us manage those challenges or adapt or flex very quickly, especially airlines. My goodness, they're a beast to that, the way that those things operate. And you and I know, Cecilia, having recently traveled and come together, for me, crossing the whole globe and comparing each airport and how they dealt with customers and how they dealt with the challenges. It's really interesting. I know some of that, though, is cultural in terms of what we find respectful or not respectful, comforting or
Yes.
not comforting. Is there, Cecilia, do you know if there's what research is out there to tell us about those? Like, we know instinctively and from our own experiences and observations, but what data exists out there around this sort of stuff? Do you know?
Data around cultural differences. Yes, there's a lot of data out there. And yes, certain cultures, it really depends on what's most valued. Individualism, personal respect, connection, relationships, and you will find that from Thailand to America to Hong Kong, where I recently traveled, the standards will be different. And that's also the fun about that's the curious and exciting part about traveling around the world, learning about different cultures.
I want to share with you something I've just got in front of me, Cecilia.
Sure.
There's a fascinating study that found people avoid giving tough feedback because they assume that the other person will be crushed by it, even though in reality most people appreciate the honesty if it's delivered with care, like your airline story. I think, that we can preempt how people are going to feel, and so, or put our own cultural bias on those conversations, yet find out that it's, as long as it's delivered respectfully, and
Yes.
with care.
Well, you're talking about workplace feedback right now,
Mm, yeah.
and that's completely different. Well, not completely. It is a different category, and the research has shown that people appreciate feedback, and they're always asking for feedback. And if you're looking at the employee surveys, team member surveys, there will always be a percentage of people who say they do not get enough feedback.
Yeah.
And that's a performance management challenge as well as our busy schedules. How often is a manager expected to give feedback? And so this this is an ongoing conundrum, isn't it? How much feedback is the right amount of feedback? How much feedback is enough? And how do we deliver the feedback? And what kind of feedback is the type of feedback that will really help the individual?
So, you know what's really interesting about that? There's this great book that I read called How to Heal the Workplace, and it talked about the different demographics. And what she this is an organizational psychologist, and what she said in that book was that the millennials and Gen Z, so those that have grown up in an era of social media, are very familiar and very comfortable with instant feedback, getting that feedback
Mm,
straight away. We're Gen X, so the feedback that we got came from the boomers who had a very traditional hierarchy of you followed the leader, followed the directive, don't answer back. We used to get in my country, I don't know about you, Cecilia, but in the school we used to get a caning, a very British kind of punishment if you spoke up or spoke back. And
oh
girls and
dear.
boys used to get it. So it was very much a shut up and put up and go and do your job. However, the next generation craves that feedback because they're used to it. They want the feedback and they want lots of it quite regularly. And interestingly, what you talk about in terms, if we think about it in terms of a model, what I say to people is if you remember nothing else, remember that your feedback needs to be constructive is a bit of a dirty word now, but it needs to be developmental. How can I frame this or position this in a way that's going to empower the person to take that knowledge and then use it to improve on what they're doing? How can
Mm,
it be delivered in a way that is supportive of their growth and learning?
right, right. Okay. So you nailed it by defining it. Developmental feedback. Call it developmental feedback, constructive feedback, negative feedback, whatever it is. It's the type of feedback that's intended for growth. So that type of feedback is crucial. And not everyone enjoys giving it. And also, not everyone enjoys receiving it, even though people put up their hand and say, I want feedback. What they're really saying is, I want praise. I want some feedback.
Yeah.
So the feedback is, I want to know I'm doing a good job. I want to feel great for having completed that project, which was my job to do, but I still want feedback. So people want praise, and you really want to know the difference. And there's praise, I believe, it should be given for work that is exceptional. Praise. Yeah, I maybe I'm a little old school, but if I deliver on my task and I did it as expected, acknowledgement is more than enough. Because if I expect praise, it should be because it's exceptional that I went the extra mile, and that is when it's deserving of praise. If it's as expected, I that's my job. That's what I'm paid to do.
Do you think, though,
That's it.
Cecilia, that it's useful? Because sometimes it's that if I go back to the conscious, unconscious competence and incompetence, sometimes we can be unconsciously competent. Sometimes we don't know that we're doing a good job. And so,
Right.
so for someone to say, that was good work today, it's like, oh,
Yes.
yeah, thanks. So it might not be exceptional. However,
Yes.
it's just reaffirming to go, yeah, I am doing a good job. Yeah, it doesn't have to
Yes.
be over the top, like, bravo, well done, but just that
Exactly.
good job.
Exactly. And I don't think that's necessary, for every day, for every task that I
No,
complete.
yeah.
So really, you really got to know your balance. But we work with a very simple model. This was a very straightforward. What worked well? what could be improved on, what will we do, what could we do differently next time. So that's a CI model, right? Constant improvement. How do we keep improving on what
Got
we're
it.
already doing? So just always list first what worked well, and there's always a list of things to celebrate, and then what can be improved on, and there's always something that you can find,
I
and
love
then
that.
just
It's
simple.
it's a simple model. And I think for me as a business owner, the underpinning thing in that is what did we learn from this, especially when a mistake occurs, is to go,
Yes.
how can we actually, for lack of a better word, profit from this? How does this knowledge become an asset in our business through the mistakes
Well,
that you've learned, that you've made?
well, that's a model that you have incorporated with the Hinwood Institute, and
Yeah.
it's a great pros postmortem review discussion, and see every mistake. I don't even call them mistakes; they're learning opportunities. Every mistake, every failure, they're actually greatest opportunities for growth.
Do you think it was interesting that you said before, Cecilia, that saying to somebody, I know, I understand, when really you don't. And there's nothing worse when somebody's sitting on the other side going, you've got no idea what it's like to be me.
Yes.
On the flip side, are there some words that can help us be more effective in having those difficult conversations? Are there words that we can try and incorporate?
Well, if you indeed need to deliver bad news, and I know that it's always challenging. Take the time first to prepare. And as we said earlier on, really look at your audience. Think of what they might be going through. And I actually have a list of do's and don'ts. This is from one of my trainings. So I'm just going to share the do's and don'ts right now. So the do's, and and I'll post this later so that it can be shared in a summary sheet. The do's: first, understand why the decision was made before sharing the news. So a lot of leaders, managers, they need to share things that they may not agree with, or they need to communicate a change, or worse, staff cuts, or financial results that will great impact the current projects. So understand why the decision was made, and do not sugarcoat. Just understand first so that you can prepare the communication piece. Another do is prepare and rehearse what you're going to say.
Mm.
So in the example of that CEO who shared about return to office, prepare and then just practice with a few people, receive some coaching. The third is explain the rationale and the process for making the decision. This is what we call explain the context. You don't need to go into deep details, but there is a simple process. Explain why this office was impacted and the other office was not, why this department received the cuts and this department did not. What was the process? What was the rationale behind that? And this is a really important one. Stick to the key points. Do not overrun, go into too much, which was the previous point. You can get into overrun of
Mm.
details. Just stick to the key points, make them bullet points, and then be empathetic. Practice the empathy. Take pauses, stop, really look at the person in the eye, allow some of the emotions to vent. Now, here are some don'ts. I think this is something that a lot of people may find useful, just to have a note of this as you're preparing. Don't sugarcoat the news. Don't try to create a silver lining. Don't collude with the receiver's reaction. And that is, don't say, well, I don't agree with the decision as well. Don't collude. Just be a leader. Stick with the key points. And then a couple more. Don't let your own emotions or viewpoints stand in the way of the message, which is connected to colluding with the receiver's reaction. But you don't need to go into a story about how it doesn't align with your own values. You don't need to add that to the recipient's reactions. Like, just have a think about it. They're already going through a tough time. Don't put it on them to try to make you feel better about the situation. I know that that's something that has been done before inadvertently. Whereas the receiver is actually trying to make the deliverer of the bad news feel better.
And it's interesting with those, sorry, Cecilia, keep going.
Okay, last two. Don't add new information that may drift away from the core message. Just stick to the facts and then do not give false hope. So, those are the quick do's and
Mm.
don'ts. And the framework is actually really simple. And if you're going to deliver bad news, give some advance warning. Not um, I'm going to book you tomorrow afternoon because I have some bad news to give you. Don't do that, okay? That's giving a person a day to worry about it. So book a meeting as promptly as possible. When that person is in the room, say, "Look, I have some bad news." Just be upfront about it and then give them a minute. It's amazing how much people can take if they're given just 5 seconds to be able to prepare for it. And a lot of times, I think people already know, and it's just kind to be prompt and direct about it. So it could be, this is not going to be an easy conversation. I wish I had better news. I'm going to lay it out as it is. Deliver the information, and then, as I said in one of the do's, provide a little bit of context. Allow that the context or the process behind it, just to not to rationalize it, but just so they know where it's coming from, and then allow some venting. Just if allow the person to react, and this is where the empathy is really important. Just sit with the person, and sometimes now it's done on Zoom, which is really hard. Just give them the space to react, to respond, and then focus on the future. Um, what are some steps? What are the next three things that you will be doing? What is the we? What's the involvement? What are the resources? That's a very basic framework, but I do recommend taking a little bit of time, preparing, and just getting some support and coaching from others before going into it. I have seen some leaders do it really well, and I've seen some leaders botch it up. The best leaders will say that it is considered one of the toughest parts of their job. And it's something they do
Definitely.
not look forward to, but they do not shy away from it because they know the danger that the longer the news is not communicated, the more serious it will become and the harder it will be to repair. And a lot of times leaders do it with the best intentions. We don't have all the information yet. Well, then just communicate that you don't have all the information. But this is what I know right now. This is not great news, but this is what I know, and I'm going to share this with you right now.
What I love about what you communicated and what I'm observing in that, there's a few things that what you said about avoiding it, definitely it gets worse. And that's as a workplace mediator, that's what I see is that people pick up on this, something's not right. So they create a narrative in their head, which is not always correct. They have a whole heap of assumption, which creates animosity and conflict. And so because the leader is not tackling this difficult conversation, they're just making the relationship more tense and more complex. And things are going out of perspective to create these tensions that lead to mediation. The other thing that I really find interesting about what you communicated, Cecilia, in terms of the do's and the don'ts, is the do's is very fact driven. Here's the information, void of my opinion, my feelings. I'm not getting dragged into the emotive narrative around this. I'm just delivering the information and the options that are available. The don'ts are very much what you've talked about in terms of personalizing, over personalizing that experience. So I've had people say to me, what do I do with this person? Because every time I have a difficult conversation, they burst into tears. Or the other one is they get really aggressive and really angry. And that is
Mm,
people's coping mechanism, obviously, to try and solicit an emotional response out of you. So, my advice to people, like you said, the empathetic approach is give them a moment to have those feelings, Don't
Yes,
buy into that. Give them that moment to hear it, let them experience that, and then continue on the conversation if you can. Sometimes it
yes.
might be, I'll give you some time to take that in, and we can continue the conversation later. So that the trap, I think, I know I'm like that, is to go, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you're all right. Or, hey, don't get so angry. We can easily get roped into that, those emotional triggers that we have from other people.
Yes. So there is that delicate fine line, though, isn't it? That balance of not getting drawn into the story, but also practicing empathy. So we
Yeah.
don't want to be an emotional robot. We don't want to completely detach and just completely be void of emotions. Because if someone is in tears and they are suffering, we don't want to just be cold and impersonal. So the example of the don'ts is to not make it about me, is is to not make it about how I am really upset as well and I
Yeah.
feel horrible. So just to be really respectful of the receiver's emotions and perspective. So that's a big part of one of the don'ts. Don't let your personal emotions get in the way. But if somebody is reacting strongly, let them. And we use
Yeah.
this term hold space. And I remember my partner saying, what do you mean hold space? Like what the and he said it in a way like what the heck do you mean by holding space? Like explain that to me. And it could be because he's a very logical person. And if you look at the personality types, I would say he's more of a data person, more logical. If you look at the DISC profile, he's definitely a D and also a C. He's dominant in D and C. And in the Lumina, which we all know, Lumina is a great predictor of personalities and tendencies. Lumina learning, the Lumina Spark profile, the color is red or blue. So blue can be very logical, and D and red can be very direct. So he's both. He says, "What do you mean hold space?" And I, and in trying to explain as a very green, very yellow, which is very I and S, trying to explain how do you hold space for someone. Holding space for someone is just being very present with them.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
know, that expression, I feel seen by you, that is what holding space is. Like nothing else matters right now. I am here with you as you are experiencing this. Touch is not required because you want to be careful about whether you have
Yeah.
permission, but just being present with that person.
It's interesting what you say in terms of we can't use touch, but we can physically connect. So we can lean in, we can nod our head, we can open our body rather than sitting back and crossing our arms. We demonstrate physically that we are present. One of the things that things can get really volatile in mediation, and one of the tools that we're taught with in mediation is in terms of holding that space, is acknowledge those feelings. So it's a way of going, I see, I hear you, I know, I can see what this is doing. I'm being cautious not to say I understand. So we're saying things like, I can see this is making this makes you really angry. You're really angry about this situation, especially when they're using overly emotive language that's normally quite inappropriate. And in the same context of someone bursting into tears, this is really, I can see this is really distressing you right now. This is upsetting you. And ask that question, why does this upset you? Or why does this make you so angry? And that shows that you are interested in the feelings that the person is having, despite not living them yourself or understanding themselves, is showing an interest in the journey that that person is going on, which is that empathetic response.
And I'll be honest, Barb, I have messed up, during my times and said the wrong thing. So it's not going to be perfect. It's about learning and practicing, getting some coaching, trying out some models, and just really coming to the table with good intentions. That's always a good start. Now, are we going to be perfect at everything we say? No, it takes practice. And, this empathy piece, I see that this is really upsetting you. That's
Yeah.
validating someone's
Yeah.
emotion. But I've seen people who have been trained say, I see that this is upsetting you.
The emotional robot. Yeah.
I can tell you're upset.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. That actually makes the person even more resistant.
Yes.
So it's the right tone, body
It's
language,
so easy, isn't it?
intonation.
Because you could
Yeah.
also, with that grin on your face, you could come across as being sarcastic as well. Or
Yes.
you've got to be so careful that it comes across as genuine.
Yes.
Cecilia, I want just because I know we're getting close to the end, I've got in front of me some research that you shared with me. It was a 2013 study by a team of Stanford, Yale, and Columbia psychologists on the impact of the different styles of negative and constructive feedback. And the researchers were just so surprised to discover that there was a particular type of teacher feedback that improved student effort and performance. And so much so, I love this, that they deemed it magical. And it says the
Yes.
magical phrase is, I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know that you can reach them. Wow,
That's
that's
the
an
phrase.
interesting.
19 words. I'm giving you these comments because I have high expectations and I know you can reach them. So it embedded in this phrase are several messages. One is you are important to me. You belong here. Two, I believe in your abilities. And you're part of a group that has high standards. Isn't that great?
I love it. Do you know, Cecilia, it reminds me, I attended a leadership conference years ago, and it's really interesting. When I'm doing leadership work, I often say to people, are there any parents in the room? Because it is our first experience of applying leadership capabilities. It's quite often the things that we do as parents are transferable in the workplace. That's not to say we're going to treat our colleagues like children, but there's transferable skills in that. And at this leadership conference, this leadership speaker was talking about how we embed thinking in the culture around us. And so
Mm,
that's a great example of it. And they said we fall into the trap as parents of saying things like, oh, your room is always so messy. You always do this. And so kids just own that identity as opposed to saying, I know you are capable of more. I
yes,
know you know how to keep your room clean. I
yes,
know you can clean
yes.
your room well. And my son was recently diagnosed with ADD, and he really impacted his schooling life and his adult life. And he was really intuitive, a high level of emotional intelligence. He had this ability to observe things in the world around him that no one else could see just because of the way that his brain worked. But he was
Hmm.
incredibly forgetful. And I remember him saying to me one time something along the lines of, Mum, I'm so dumb. I forget everything. I always forget everything. And I had to,
It's hard to hear.
yeah, and to
Yeah.
reframe that and say you can remember things. You
Yes,
need to develop different ways of being able to do it.
yes,
You're smart, you're clever, you're observant. You have a good feeling for how other people think and feel. You need to develop some different ways of being able to remember the things that you need for everyday life, and we all have to do that. It was something along those lines, rather than affirming, yes, you are forgetful. You're all so forgetful, son. Oh, you're so forgetful. You always forget things. I'm not going to give him that identity and not
yeah,
let himself, I guess, victimize himself around these identities of area where we have things that are not our genius. There's some we can't be good at everything. There's some things that we're
yes,
great at and work around that challenge to find solutions to do things better. And as leaders, we've got that opportunity to provide that feedback that enables people to
Absolutely.
develop.
You said it. I love what you said about the culture. And this phrase was from Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code. And he studied the cultures of organizations that had a strong feedback culture. So feedback is key to growth, as we already established. So constructive feedback is where the greatest opportunities for growth lie. And yet we do not give the feedback in the right way. So he gave a lot of examples, and this phrase was one of them as to how organizations construct their feedback mechanisms. And there are so many ways to improve on feedback. An organization that I worked with, it was very simple. They had digitized a way for people to give feedback very quickly on their phones. It was just did your manager, they would get a prompt, did your manager support you in um, in any one of the tasks? It was a different question each day, and the feedback was immediate, yes or no.
Mm.
So they were receiving a ton of data on how well everyone was doing, just from getting the data and building a culture of feedback. So, you talked about the different models, and this is one of them. You preempt a series of constructive feedback with that phrase. So I think I prepared a few phrases for the workplace because this may not be suitable. The example that we gave, because it's for middle school teachers to their students. And so the workplace phrase coming from a manager, I prepared a few. So here they are. So I'm just going to share them with you very quickly. You can preface your constructive comments with, I am sharing these comments as we set high expectations that we know you're capable of. I want you to help you achieve these standards. I wish to share this feedback as my goal is to support your growth. I see great potential in you, and let's work together to reach those goals. Third one is, I'm sharing these comments because I believe in your abilities and know you're able to meet the high standards we set. I'm here to help you succeed. There is a collaborative energy
Mm.
behind those phrases.
It's a more sophisticated. I know we're just in the interest of time, we'll talk about this another time. And I know we've got it on our list of things to discuss, but it's a more sophisticated approach to the yuck sandwich. We call it here
Yes,
the poo sandwich. So it's something
yes,
really nice and pleasant and fluffy, the yucky bit, and then closing out on
yes.
something on and something nice. And sometimes that model works, but not always. It doesn't land. And this is so much more sophisticated than that. It's
Well,
pre-framing the environment, the culture, the intent. It's more sincere.
well, I would not recommend everyone use that, and for several reasons. One, if it's not your communication style, it's not your personality style, it's going to come across as inauthentic. What do you
Exactly.
mean? What do you mean? Like you have my best interest? Especially for the red type personality. So be careful with that. I'm just sharing them as an example of how to change that over from the middle school teacher, phraseology.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to emphasize, and this underpins everything that we have shared so far, if there's no trust, it's just going to come across as lip service and it's not going to land well. And people are going to be further skeptical or cynical. So, trust underpins all of this, and trust and psychological safety. And I'm sorry that we're out of time because I would love to spend um, a lot more time talking about these two topics. And if those are done right, the feedback models are going to be not only well received, but they are going to be incredibly productive because when the trust and the relationship are there, the growth happens. The growth happens naturally because the intention is genuine. and it would be
Exactly. So
appreciated.
you build that relationship, like empathy builds trust, trust builds long-term relationship and rapport. And maybe that's something we can talk about in a later podcast about how to give feedback so that you nurture trust and you don't destroy it. And it's interesting when I look at those statements, if I was a D person, right, I
Mm-hmm.
think I would just be transparent and honest. And that's really important. It's like maybe I haven't, this isn't the best way, but the intent is along the lines of, maybe I haven't been helpful. Maybe I haven't been supporting your growth, but I want to. I really want to.
Yes,
And in order to do that, what I'm going to do now is give you some feedback because if I haven't been supportive in your growth previously, moving forward, I want to be more supportive. So I'm going to give you this feedback now. No, I'm not a D, but that's probably what I would try and do to be able to address my
actually,
behaviors.
good point. So this is something else that I forgot to mention. And with manager and team member relationships, it's so easy to start out upfront and say, how do you like to receive feedback? What's the
Yeah.
style in which you prefer to receive feedback? Some might say, "Oh, I need it to be soft. I need to be warned in advance." Or some people say, "I like it really direct." Great, then you can adapt accordingly. So it's interesting to it's another level, another layer that you can prepare. And over time, it becomes a little bit more unconscious competence. But initially, there's nothing wrong with saying, no, we're going into this relationship and there's going to be a lot of information passed back and forth. Tell me how you prefer your communication. And in with the Lumina Spark, we actually have a chart where each team member shares their communication preference, their communication
Love it.
style preference.
Love
Yeah.
it. And again, in mediation, it's the common thing that people come into conflict about is an interpretation of what good communication is. And
Yes.
people have different styles, different needs, different desires around that communication. And it creates conflict when it doesn't align and people aren't listening to other people's style that they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just know, giving constructive feedback is very different from delivering bad news. So delivering bad news, just wanna be sure people realize, do not start off with, "How's it going? How are you and your family doing?"
That's
Like,
great because
don't
now you're going to
don't
lose your job.
yeah,
Yeah.
please don't do the small talk. That's not the time. Be very direct and go straight to it. So I think we've got a lot of models here. We're going to summarize, share in the notes, as well as link to that study if anyone is interested in reading up a little bit more.
So, just closing out, Cecilia, what I'll say to the listeners, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then you really need to check out. We've just skimmed the surface and we want to be able to give people some really, really good skills and knowledge and learning. Cecilia cited some great stuff from her training. And it's so frustrating, isn't it, Cecilia? Because you really want to unpack it, all of this stuff, but we really can only give people those tips. So we've got some great masterclasses coming up where we're delivering packed professional development into about 75 minutes of learning. And there's no hard sell. There is more tools and strategies and research and case studies like we've covered off on today. So if you go to our calendar of events, you'll see when our next masterclasses are coming up. We've got one called Kind Words, Tough Talks, where Cecilia is going to share with you key strategies to communicate difficult news while maintaining trust and credibility, like some of the things we've talked about today, how to apply that empathetic communication and how to manage those emotional reactions and resistance, and how to develop your own personalized approach to delivering those tough messages in a confident manner. So we look forward to you joining us on those masterclasses at a later time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining. It was a lot of fun.